I'm Mark,
And I'm Bryan
and this is the Baptist.
and the Buddhist.
Yeah. So Brian, why don't we tell anyone, no one why they're watching or listening to this?
Yeah,
Like what in the
so
world are they getting into?
yeah, that's a good question. If you've started watching this or listening to this, there is a very slim chance you probably have a very small interest or curiosity as to what this show is. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this. So, the Baptist and the Buddhist. What is this? What in the world is happening? Um, so this is a show or a podcast that uh I don't know, in general, I guess this podcast is uh, a look into a set of identical twins, us, with very different beliefs and faiths. And so this whole show is going to be kind of an a compare and contrast, kind of an exploration.
And I think they're going to find out who we are as we find out who each other and who ourselves are.
That's a good way to put it. And so when I think when I had this idea for this podcast, it really is in every corner of the possibilities of what this podcast could be. Um, really revolves around the idea of like educating. It's we will be exploring our faiths, um, not just for the sake of I mean, first of all, not for the sake at all of of debate, which might seem like such a wild idea in this day and age. But there's I find great importance in the idea of interfaith dialogue, and I'm here to talk about my beliefs and my faiths. You're here to talk about your beliefs and your faiths. And with that, we are educating each other, not
Mhm.
about what to think or anything, but what to help each other understand who we are.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think before the show, we kind of were talking about why we were doing this, and you kind of brought up the fact that you want to, like, part of this education is to not, convince each other or convince other people, but just to shine light on like why we believe what we believe and really it's kind of the mindset behind that. And if I can make a real world analogy in my world with like fraud investigations, such a key, almost forgotten part of any kind of like criminal investigations or any kind of like comparative thing like that at all is that you if you miss the mindset and the why or the rationalization why something is happening, you can miss a lot of detail and a lot of facts out of that one thing. So being able to just understand the why, not I mean we don't have to I don't have to accept your why and you don't have to accept my why, but just having the knowledge of that why. I think
yeah,
that was a huge part of what you were telling me before, and I just thought of that analogy, and how important that is really in any aspect of anyone's day to day.
yeah, and the cool thing about that is that like it plays like multiple roles. I think there's like this incredible twist in just that learning about the mindset of someone else. Like you could look at someone's beliefs or culture or whatever and think that's so different, that's weird, you know. You could think that's so weird, and why in the world do they do that? But that the asking why in the world do they do that, um you start, you know, it opens up the possibility of learning exactly why they do that, and like understanding
Mhm.
why someone does something doesn't mean you believe it.
Exactly.
You just know now a different perspective.
Exactly. And
and
even oh, go ahead.
and the binocular uh aspect of this, the surprising twist that I was alluding to just a second ago, is that
Mhm.
when you learn about someone, some different perspective, it gives you a wider lens, and kind of like in my head, it's you you find a separate ground in on which to stand, to look back at your own beliefs and perspectives and see your beliefs and
Mhm.
perspectives in a completely different light.
And it can strengthen you from that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like it, it's not about like, you know, question, like you all of a sudden question your beliefs or anything, but like it gives you a richer, like broader understanding of it, and like could add new dimensions and stuff to it too, like a deeper understanding, I guess.
Right. Exactly. And like with that twist, there's also another twist in this podcast, at least, like the Shyamalan twist is that we're twins. We're identical twins, and like seeing that we're coming from two hugely different perspectives, it's like, how in the world are you guys twins?
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's a kind of good segue into what the who are we?
yeah. So you understand what this podcast is all about, through my rambling. Maybe you may have pieced together the summation of the reason, the whole why we're here. Who are we though, you know? um why should you care, you know? Like, do you want do you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't really care
Okay.
who goes first, but so I'm Mark. I'm not
The
really gonna give a
Baptist of the
the
title.
the Baptist of the title. I'm not gonna get into like just as a forewarning. I'm not gonna get in too much into like location, even though you can find that out. I know how all that works. Like you can easily find that out and what church I go to. But I'm just not gonna openly like affiliate myself with any specific church right now because I don't want to reflect my opinion as theirs. Because it's probably not in some cases. A lot of
Well,
times it will
it
be,
will
but
probably flash a disclaimer at the beginning of the show or something. The views
yeah,
and
exactly.
opinions of the hosts are just that, just our,
Exactly.
and they do not
Yeah,
reflect any kind of institution we belong to or anything.
exactly. Yep. So I'm Mark. I'm Brian's twin brother by a minute short here. So yeah, I'm the Baptist side of this podcast, and really uh I guess to go into like the the definition of that itself, like with my beliefs, it's kind of a breakdown. um because I'm called a Baptist in this title, and I'm in the camp of Baptists, um by fundamentals, basically, you know, the salvation by Christ, and the Bible is the word of God, and the triunation of nature of God, and all that, you know, the fundamentals of a Baptist belief. But I am so far away from a traditional Baptist because um, of my, I guess we call it a dispensational belief, or um, line of study or way of study. A lot of people that believe what I believe call themselves grace believers. I really don't have a specific title for myself because I don't really fall under any specific category, but I'm Baptist by fundamentals, grace believer by an explanation or an approach to the Bible. Um, and really the approach, I'm going to just lay the definitions out here real quick. Um, Baseline, because we'll probably get into more of them as we go
Oh
along.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But so, like a grace believer will approach the Bible with a dispensational view, which is a um, based off of Second Timothy 2:15. It's we study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman need that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So lots of people rightly divide the Bible so many different ways, but the way we approach it is seeing basically God working with men two different ways in an overall sense. One is earthly and one is heavenly. The earthly is for like the nation of Israel and their history all the way from Genesis all the way up to like mid Acts. And that was all prophecy, that was all kingdom centered. And then there was what we call, or what the Bible calls, a mystery. And that mystery revealed unto the Apostle Paul. It was completely separated from anything you read before that. It's not found anywhere before that. And these are unique, specific revelations that Paul received. And going into like the two different, we call, I guess I'll break it down like the kingdom and the mystery, the two different like divisions that we mainly see. Um, like
And
destination.
I will interject real quick
Sure.
and say like I like you said, we will go like we'll probably like explore a lot of this in later episodes because like
Mhm.
most of it, you know, doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly. Yeah.
I need definitions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and basically, in a very basic sense, like the two divisions that we see in the Bible have different like destinies, different like eternal functions, and different purposes. So we'll definitely get into that later on, like the specifics in that stuff. So when I say like in this age or this day and age, I usually referring to like the present day in which like in our beliefs that God deals with man here right now. So if I say like in this age, that's just my terminology for right now. But that's my basic beliefs. Let's see. I know we had some basic questions to answer. I guess I'll ask those to myself if you want me to.
Yeah,
Um,
is this before you do though, like is there like,
I guess
you
there
know,
is a story
a,
to it.
is there like a biographical story about how you are what you are now?
Yeah, yeah. So seeing where I am now, here's the story of where I got to where I am now. So like growing up, you and I, we basically have the same backstory up until a specific time. So we grew up in a in a household that we went to church throughout elementary school, parts of middle school, just non-denominational. Really didn't get too much from it. Um, and in 2009, my now wife Anna, she presented um, the message from the Bible to me, the gospel, and it was something I've never ever heard before in my life. I'm like, why didn't I ever hear that? And it was basically a conversation like, hey, do you know you're going to heaven? I'm like, well, I know about that heaven stuff, and hopefully only God can judge me, and hopefully He sees me for hopefully I'm good enough, all that stuff. And I was just like, yeah, don't worry about me. But then like she explained to me like, yeah, Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and you don't you have nothing to like pay for, or you it's not about you, it's about what Christ did. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So I we call it getting saved. I got saved November of 2009 ish. I don't exactly remember the date or anything, but I'm pretty sure that's when it was around. Um, and from there, I was I was just basic a basic Christian path from the beginning, and but I was introduced early on to this um, right division, dispensational stuff, and I think I caught on pretty early because I was going to a church that was not in that specific like thought process, and I could pick out things that I was taught outside of that, like, oh, you know what, that doesn't sound like the proper definition of what the mystery is according to like Paul in Ephesians 3. So like as I went on in my Christian walk, I got more and more familiar with that approach to the Bible. And then when I moved here, started going to our church here, uh, they that's all they teach. That's their main doctrine and their main belief, and it. Uh, I had a hard time accepting that for a very long time. I thought it was arrogant and pompous or something like that. I just hated the idea, like, wow, this is so stupid. Because from a regular Christian perspective, uh, it's kind of you think they're like not really worshiping, but like reverencing the Apostle Paul more than anyone else. And that really struck a nerve with me for a while. But then as we studied, I accepted that and really held on to that. So I started getting into some ministries. I led a Bible study for 5 years. I've preached and sang several times, and I do the video ministry right now at our church, and some security ministry, and um, I've touched a lot of different ministries here and there. I was a youth director intern at one point at another church, so I've been all over the map, and um,
How would you define ministry? Because
yeah,
I
that's a good
noticed you
question.
use it in uh I don't know, almost surprising contexts.
Ministry in my circles is really a place to serve. So if you clean the church house weekly, that's a ministry. If you preach weekly or teach Sunday school, or run a Bible study, that's a ministry. So the ministry is a basic term that we use for like basic servitude, I guess.
Okay.
Basically anything can be a ministry if you're doing it in the right spirit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like kind of about intention in a way.
Yeah, yep, yeah,
Okay.
intention.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's my basic story. um let's hear your story.
Okay. So I'm the Buddhist of the title, which I can't remember how YouTube works, so I'll point. If you're listening this on audio, it doesn't really matter. So as you had said, we're identical twins. We grew up in the same house, uh, the same non-denominational Protestant household, um, going to church through elementary school, maybe a little of middle school.
Hmm.
Um, and it's hard for me to point out where I like started getting curious about different religions, but I think it was like just through like I don't know, exposure through reading a, a lot of books. You remember me
Oh, I
growing up.
remember your books.
And a lot of them, just kind of through bits and pieces would like introduce me to different ideas and different perspectives, and that just made me really curious. Like in retrospect, it I was curious um, about different ideas and stuff. So about a decade ago, I like started seriously looking at different religions. I spent some time in uh, exploring like the neo-pagan traditions, like a little like a maybe a year in like Wicca, and then several years in Druidry. Um, and while it's I loved learning about a completely wildly different perspective than I ever was familiar with, um, it it wasn't it still didn't have what I was you know yearning for in a like spiritual practice. And so it was about 7 years ago. There was a My wife was had said to me, "Hey, there's this group of like Tibetan monks visiting a local temple, doing like a presentation thing. It was kind of like an open house, um, lots of different like informal activities and whatnot." And so I was like, "Heck yeah, I want to learn about a different. I want to experience a different faith. Something like Buddhism I had never really ever looked into, read about, understood." Um, and so we went, and it piqued my curiosity. Um, and so, having gone to the temple and like seen things that I didn't understand, I was even more curious. It's like I want to experience like one of their regular Sunday services and see what it's like. Um, and well, I think immediately one of the things that I found really interesting was like meditation was such an important key part of this, and I don't think I'd ever realized that like before, you know, looking into Buddhism. But meditation was always something that I was interested in like delving into more in my past, spiritual explorations. And so, like the emphasis on mindfulness and stuff as well, which ties into the meditation. So I was like, okay, let's check out one of the Sunday services. And we went, and I didn't understand any of it, uh, really. But one of the things that really struck me was this, like, in some of the supplications and like chants and stuff, there was this word that kept popping up, equanimity. And I had never heard of that word. I'd never like it was a new word, and I was like, they're saying like this word's popping up quite a bit. I wonder what this is. So I looked into it, and it was this. Equanimity is like an even, a balanced, even mindedness, and I thought that's a really like that's a really interesting concept, and something just like resonated with me with that.
Mm.
And so like we started attending the services more often. Like we went back, and I bought a few books, as I tend to do, and I just like I the colors and the chanting and the all of that, like the symbols and stuff, like they're cool. But what really got me was what we call the Dhamma, or the Dharma, the teachings. And I I don't know. I felt like this is what I've been looking for. Um,
Mm.
and um, yeah, just everything about the practice. I thought this this fits. You know, this works, uh, and make everything made sense. You know, all of it makes sense to me. So,
Mm.
and some of it's challenging, and some of it uh, is hard to understand. But you know, the more you look into it, and the more you like, or the more I look into it, and the more I like applied it, you know, I thought this this works for me. Um, I'm just looking at my notes, and so yeah, so that temple that we had originally visited was the the one I still attend and volunteer at, and it's like a non-sectarian Tibetan tradition primarily, um, with I think with an emphasis on the non-sectarian part, because we
Now,
have
what's
teach.
sectarian?
So that would be non-denominational. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, yeah, uh, yeah. That's a good question, actually. You know, you get you're so familiar with the terminology that you forget that sometimes it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense for other people. But
Right. Exactly. That's why we're talking.
yeah, this is it, guys. This is the reason right here. Um, no, but so like I've been a member of that temple for like officially since I think 2014, maybe 2015. I can't remember the dates, but um, but I myself don't practice a Tibetan tradition. Um, because in Buddhism, there's like three main schools of thought: Theravada, which is like the way of the elders, the like one of the oldest surviving uh, traditions, I guess. That primarily is like is in like the South Asia, and then there's Mahayana, which is like more northern Asia, I guess. And then there's Vajrayana, which is almost, I think, primarily exclusively Tibetan Buddhism. Like it's its own thing, and I my practice is much more rooted in Theravada. Um, I mean, I don't like say, oh yeah, I'm Theravada Buddhist. Um, but yeah, all the like the the discourse, like the suttas and the discourses, um, that Theravada Buddhism uses comes from the Pali Canon, um, and that's usually my go-to stuff. Um, it's my jam, but
Now,
and
is that a collection of like multiple writings or?
yeah, yeah, and each the three main traditions, you know, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana all have like a different version of the canon. The canon,
Okay.
which is a collection. It's actually called the Tipitaka in Pali. In Sanskrit, it's Tripitaka, and it's the three baskets, and it's broken into like three vast categories.
Hmm.
Um, but we'll get into that in a later video. But so yeah, the my practice is informed by like the Theravada teachings. Even though I am a member of a Vajrayana temple, um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, I didn't know that there were like non-denominational, non-sectarian like Buddhist temples, I guess. Like are there like non-sectarian and then specific sectarian?
Um, you know, that's actually a really good question because like my temple, it's it's not like a widely popular like tradition. The tradition is called the Rime tradition, and it means non-sectarian in Tibetan, or close enough approximation.
Hmm.
And so it's because in Tibetan Buddhism, there's like four or five different like specific traditions of Tibet. Like there's Nyingma and like the Gelugpa and a few other ones that are not coming to mind. Um, so like the Rime tradition is mainly non-sectarian Tibetan Buddhism,
Okay.
but our temple often has like teachers from the Zen tradition or the Theravada tradition, um, but mainly the Tibetan tradition. But I think there's also like this difference in uh, like Western Buddhism, that puts a different kind of puts a different spin on some of the traditions. Um, but what you ask about like non-sectarian, like other non-sectarian, like I mean, there's a lot of like very traditional temples. I haven't personally like visited them, but there are other um, there are other like Buddhist groups um, around this area at least that are more like broad, um, and because like the different traditions might differ in like the approach, how to print, like the practice and the approach, and like the key texts that they derive most of the teachings from and stuff. But like at the end of the day, like the Buddha Dhamma is the Buddha Dhamma. So like the Buddha's teachings are the Buddha's teachings, no matter what tradition you follow. And there's like a kind of, I mean, you can always get into like different debates between traditions and like why blank is better than blank. Like, but
Right.
at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you're Buddhist and I'm Buddhist because, I mean, I don't want to like misquote like the Buddhist teachings, but he and I'll look this up for the next episode and like expound on this a little. But he had said that there's like 84,000 different ways to teach the Dhamma, because people are different, and there's a different way to get to different people, I guess,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. It just kind of reminds me of how like the Christian world is because there are so many different denominations. Some are more like neglect or like rejected by like mainstream Christianity than others, but like I'm Baptist, or I'm Presbyterian, or I'm Lutheran. Like at the end of the day, we're all Christians, like Christians.
Yeah,
So at the end of the day, like our root beliefs are usually the same. Um, and it's that just remind me so much of how you were describing like you may believe like you may be this or you may be that, but at the end of the day we're Buddhists. Like
yeah,
reminds
yeah,
me a lot of that. And like I know like as far as my experience in my church, like we aren't hard pressed like if you're not a Baptist you can't come in, because really we like if we could, we would take Baptist out of our practice or our name, because we don't like most other Baptist churches or beliefs just aren't really lined up with ours. Like they would probably call us heretics sometimes. So um, I mean, I would say non-denominational, but that's also denomination these days. So,
Yeah, that's true.
but if a grace believer came through that wasn't a Baptist, we would still be able to fellowship. And I mean, any other type of Christian would be able to fellowship with each other anyways, because we're all we all have commonalities and like
Mm.
expanding or extending beyond that. You and I have commonalities too, so like it's not hard to fellowship or at least get along um, with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, yeah, that idea of getting along with each other, despite our, the differences. Um, that's a big part of this. And I
Yeah,
like when you were giving your introduction, like I was just like, I just had this moment. It's like, yes, like this is great. Like this is exactly what I want to happen, because like you might come from like a not um not as widely uh I I don't even know
we
what word to
come
use.
our color is very unpopular, or not. I mean, it's pretty unpopular with a lot of people that disagree with us, but it's not mainstream. It's not very common. Like our stripe is very unique and not really heard of. There are some variations of like dispensationalism, and really, if you look at Old Testament, New Testament, you can call that dispensationalism, um, which uh, some people don't see it that way. We don't see it that division. So like, but the specifics of where I stand, it's like extremely not widely represented out there. And like in these conversations, I'll try to represent like the whole of Christianity and like fundamentals, but like boil it down, I'm gonna probably explain things a little different than what most Christians are gonna
Well, see,
agree with.
and that's the thing that I love about this, is because like you speak from like an uncommon perspective, you know, even in Christianity. So like even Christians can watch this and learn something about a
Exactly.
denomination or whatever that's different from theirs. That they're like, wow,
Exactly.
I never, someone might, like watch this and think, wow, I've never even heard of such a perspective within Christianity. Like,
Exactly. And I've
a
heard
Lutheran
stories.
or a Catholic can like watch this and think, oh, I'm even other Baptists probably will watch
Oh,
this and think,
yes.
I've never heard of that. I've never
Oh,
heard of that kind of
yeah,
approach.
definitely. And even like going along with that, like um I've heard stories and I've seen this firsthand where people you'll just be talking to someone and I don't really introduce like my specific beliefs with people, but they'll be like, "Oh yeah, well, I was reading the Bible and I saw this." I'm like, and they start explaining like more along the lines of our like my thinking, and they're like that's just a wild thought that came to my head. I'm like, well, actually, like we teach that. It's like, oh, really? And I've heard people bring that up, and their leadership or maybe a radio host will shoot them down and try to discredit why they're thinking that, and they'll go back to their traditions and like try to negate what they just said because oh that's not what we believe in like this specific denomination or something. It's like, well, why can't you
Hmm.
just explore that further? Because like in from my perspective, like you should explore that further because like you might understand what I understand about it. So
Yeah.
it's like being able to just have those conversations. Like people might believe what you believe and they don't even know it, or like people might believe something differently from what they think and they don't know that there's someone else that believes that, and
Yeah.
so they will feel alone, or like, wow, am I crazy about seeing this or thinking this way? And they're not, because other people do. So they're not
That's
alone.
that's another really really important part I think of like what we're doing is like, and not just us two, but like this act of sharing beliefs, like it, might give a voice to someone who didn't think there was anyone else thinking that, that there's,
Right.
and so like, so I think if more people of different faiths like was able to share what they believed, some other people who like whose ideas might not be concentrated or whatever, who they may not have known there was a belief or something that like concentrated those thoughts that they had into something that becomes useful, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, there's somewhere I belong,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
um so that's, I think that's a good segue into like our next like kind of section or whatever. Like what exactly is it, not exactly, but like what is it in general, like that we believe, where are we coming from, I guess. um I don't know if that's exactly where you were thinking of like the three little questions that I had sent.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
No, I think yeah, what exactly is like my faith? I kind of already discussed that, but like the three questions you asked, like what's ultimate reality? How should we live in this world? And what is our ultimate purpose? And again, Christians, especially listening to this is going to sound weird to you because this is not common Christian belief, but
So I do want to point out like those three questions I just like pulled straight from like the Intro to World Religions textbook that I have. These three questions are like very useful when approaching a religion or belief that you don't know anything about, because they are so broad, these questions are so broadly defined that like almost any religion can answer them sufficiently and give you an idea of where they're coming from.
right. No, that's cool that I know you took that class and I took that class separately. So it's kind of cool that we can bring that in. Hey, as an aside, what's the time we have right now? Like how long has this been going so far? Just to
Not sure.
time it out.
Let me.
We're, well, like, with our early recording, we're almost to an hour.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, um, so the first question is like, the, what was it? What was the ultimate,
What is ultimate reality?
what is ultimate reality? And really, oh man, this is like from, uh, I'm just going to say a grace believer point of view. Um, ultimate reality is in the spiritual world in eternity. But from my studies and my point of view, like the spiritual world isn't that like esoteric and abstract from what other people might believe. It's very real, very very um I mean, you could start getting into like fourth dimension stuff, like with what I've studied, like from my own personal studies and from what I've been taught and everything. But in a nutshell, um, ultimate reality is eternity. In eternity, God created all things. So very basically condensed, God created all things so He could dwell in it. Like that was His ultimate purpose, was to dwell in His creation. It wasn't to it wasn't necessarily to create a being that he could love, but it was to dwell in his creation because in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, um, and he could dwell in it, which to do his to be able to dwell in it, he has he will be able to do this through his plan, and it's not as abstract and weird sounding and like mysterious as you think it is. If and I won't go too much into it, but like his plan, basically to to dwell and subdue all things, which is very I know that terminology is like really like what in the world are you talking about, but
I think
that's
it's
basic
I think
eternity.
that terminology though is would be familiar to different faiths though.
Yeah,
Like Islam for example is a surrendering to God, and I think people outside of the terminology of subduing or surrendering, it's like this forceful thing, but it's not.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess I will define that a little bit because the way I'm talking about it is not even probably familiar with most Christians. So God created the heaven and the earth. In the Bible, he talks about subduing all things unto himself because there is rebellion. Um, first it started with Lucifer, and then he was able to buy in the creation of man with his um, with his plan to take over um, the earth and the heavens. Um, and God is doing, he has a plan to take both of those things back, the earth through the nation of Israel and the heavenlies through the body of Christ, the believers in this age, as I mentioned earlier, the grace, the the believers in this age of grace, as we call it. So he would subdue all of those things back to himself so he could dwell in it eternally. So that's basically ultimate reality. Things that we see in this temporal world are just temporary and are a shadow of things in heaven. And that's kind of like where like my thought of like a extra dimension comes from. And there are verses that talks about four different dimensions, like breadth, width, height, and what's the other one? I forgot what the other one was, but like it lists four. It's like, why are there four? That's weird. Um, really, really off topic kind of subject, but so reality is more than what we see, because right now we walk by faith, not by sight, as you always hear. And it's not that we are like living for the things that we see; it's living for things that we don't even see now. Um, but would still be familiar because there things in this world are a shadow of things in heaven, as the Bible says. So it's kind of like looking at your hand shadow. You see a two-dimensional version of your hand, but like right now, if I see something in this world, that's a three-dimensional thing, a corporeal thing of an eternal reality. And it's not like abstract or esoteric like concepts. It's like real things. So how should we live in this world, this temporal corporeal world? It's basically what how I just kind of described it, like walking by faith, not by sight. For Christians in general, we live according to the Word of God, which is the Bible, and we live in the Spirit, which that's also not that much of an esoteric idea or abstract idea, because the Word of God communicates with the Spirit of God through us, or with us, and we it helps us understand the things of God and not just the things of man. So we walk in the Spirit, understanding the things of God. Uh, so walking by faith, walking in the Spirit, um, comprehending those things above, and we're told to live peaceably with all men as much as we can, with long suffering and grace, especially in this like day and age. We're not taking up swords and battling armies of giants. We're not we're not physically fighting for things uh, of God. We're living in grace and peace and long suffering, just as God is dispensing to us these days. Grace and peace to you, is what Paul always starts out his letters with. So we want to embody that grace and that peace and the long suffering and love. And then the other question was, what is our ultimate purpose? And I kind of touched on that in the first part because that all ties in together. Ultimate purpose in this age of grace with the believers in this age is to reign with Christ in the heavenlies, to help, and that purpose is to subdue all things unto Him, uh, and to shine forth His glory. And that's another thing that's not abstract. Um, uh, and then the ultimate purpose for outside of this age, like in the Old Testament and with what Jesus was doing on earth and his ministry and things that are after, are to subdue the earth back unto himself. So that's like the ultimate purpose of like the believers, is being used as a tool, to be able to fulfill the plan of God, and uh, to get to that ultimate place of him dwelling in his creation. And I know that was a lot and some weird terminologies and
Oh,
ideas.
it's okay. Even though I don't understand a lot of it, I feel like we will by the end of this podcast.
I don't know.
Okay, awesome. Is that
Well, that was the three questions.
yeah,
You,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool. Um I guess it's my turn to tackle those three questions.
yep.
Um and I don't want to go on too long, so I
I think after
probably
those three questions, like that would be a good place to stop and like
yeah.
leave them on the edge for more.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. So, so what is ultimate reality according to Buddhism? And I like this question. It's a little. I feel like it might be a little too generally worded, but I think it's done on purpose because
Mm-hmm.
so many religions have like such vastly different like cosmologies and like what is the world, what is existence,
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
I appreciate the vagueness of this question, I think. But so what is ultimate reality according to Buddhism? Well, the Buddha taught what is called the Four Noble Truths, which I think this is really like at the core of what ultimate reality is. Um, and so the first noble truth he taught was that existence is characterized by dukkha. This word dukkha that we use, it's kind of hard to translate. A lot of people say suffering. Um, I think that's a sufficient word, but maybe not sufficient. I don't know. Unreliability, stress, dissatisfaction. Um, so basically, if if you're existing, you will ultimately, inevitably experience dukkha. Um, and that's not ultimate reality though, but uh, I guess it kind of is though. So the dukkha, why is there dukkha? Well, there's dukkha because of what of ignorance or delusion of ultimate reality. And this ultimate reality is very basically summarized by three characteristics. So all conditioned things are share three characteristics with each other, and that is dukkha, dissatisfaction, or unsatisfactoriness, or unreliability. Instability is another good word. The other is it's called anicca, or impermanence, transiency. Things are always constantly changing from moment to moment. Nothing stays the same. So like it's just like a current, the old adage that you can't step in the same river twice. This is exactly what it is fundamentally. Anything and everything conditioned, which is basically everything, is always changing all the time. And the third characteristic is anatta, or not self, and it's the lack of an inherent essence or like label. It's kind of like labellessness. Things lack an inherent label. It's like you take apart the motorcycle, you lay out all the pieces, and it's like, okay, point to where the motorcycleness comes in. All things are made up of, all like the object A is made up entirely of non-object A things, and you can break that down. So to summarize everything, all things are unreliable, impermanent, and not self. And so that's what ultimate reality is. And then the Buddha posited that from misunderstanding these three things, we start to rely, we misunderstand, uh, and we convince ourselves kind of that that things are reliable, are permanent, are self, um, and and so we start like making these assumptions about things, and then when they prove to be otherwise, these three things, we start to suffer. We start to experience dukkha, and so we start to and cling to things we want, even as they're already changing, or we push things away, which is like aversion. Aversion is like the same, different side of the same coin, but um, so that's kind of ultimate reality in a very small nutshell. Um, but so how should we live in the world? Um, I guess I should probably finish the Four Noble Truths. I think I said the two first ones. So the first one, all existence is characterized by dukkha, or suffering. The second one is that ignorance and clinging is the root of this suffering. Ignorance, misunderstanding inherent, you know, ultimate reality per se. So the third is that the cessation of suffering, that suffering or dukkha, like we can put an end to that dukkha. And the fourth noble truth is, I think, what I would probably define as the second question: how should we live in this world? And the fourth noble truth is the path to the cessation of suffering, and that is the path is the eightfold path. And it's kind of this 8 dimensions of a life that would lead to the ending of dukkha. And this, in a really, really generalized sense, is basically um, thoughts, words, and actions that lead to the cessation of suffering. Um, a very generic list might be like generosity and compassion and mindfulness. But you could break down categories and get really just like knee deep in it and like figure out specifics, kind of. Which leads to the third question: what is our ultimate purpose? Well, in Buddhism, the ultimate purpose is to end suffering. And I guess kind of tying back to ultimate reality, um, the the kind of trap you fall into when you misunderstand ultimate reality and start clinging to things and believing things are permanent and, you know, reliable, is that like you cling to them, things unravel and you realize it doesn't work out and you suffer, and that starts this cycle of um, suffering and clinging and, you know, dukkha, and, you know, repeat, you know. um and that cycle, we in general is called samsara, which is like the world we live in, the, you know, existence in general, and like in the most, probably in the most general sense you can think of getting trapped in a cycle of wanting, of desire, of clinging and suffering. So the ultimate purpose, this end of suffering, is also the breaking of that cycle, and attaining. I think everyone's familiar with the word nirvana, or in Pali nibbana, and it is, it's nothing. It's like, you know, you were saying, it's not esoteric. It's not this esoteric idea. It's not a place you go to either. Like, you know, and it's not, you know, just bliss out. Nibbana literally is just the extinguishment of the sources of suffering, and that's it.
So, what does that look like? Like to reach that ultimate purpose, like what does that look like?
Yeah, that, wow, that is a good question. Well, Nibbana is like, you can't really describe it per se, um but it is the um I'll give a metaphor because those seem to work best. But so so and Nibbana actually, like, etymologically means like the extinguishing of a flame. And what's interesting is that it's not like the blowing out of a flame like a candle. It's like the depletion of the fuel of the flame. So
Hmm.
you run out of wax, you run out of wick, and there's, the conditions are insufficient to sustain that flame. And so the goal and the practice of, you know, the eightfold path is to deplete the sources of the flame to the point where the flame goes out completely. And
Hmm.
so you are, your practices are aimed, it's aimed at um at ending like craving or clinging, or, you know, attachment. You hear the word attachment used a lot,
Hmm.
um through, you know, through wisdom training and ethics, um and and like meditation and mindfulness. um Sorry, I'm losing track of, of my thought processes. But so what does it look like?
Yeah, what does it look like?
It's like, it's ending processes that lead to suffering, that cause this uh this this cycle. And so, you know, when you when one attains a nibbana, it's just simply the end the ending of that cycle of suffering in a way. And there's like this notion in Buddhism that that actually kind of ties in with ultimate reality, that there's like there's conventional reality, which is the everyday view of the world, the unenlightened view of the world, of that, you know, that kind of overlooks the three characteristics of existence. And then there is ultimate reality, which is like the enlightened view of the world, which is seeing the world for what it is, which you be able to recognize that everything is impermanent, and everything is void of self, and everything is like ultimately unreliable in terms of bringing us peace and stability.
Hmm.
um I don't know if that answers your question at all.
I think it does. I think it does. I think if like it's something kind of like you'll know when you get there.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And um and it, like in the stories, like, you know, the Buddha gained enlightenment. And like in Buddhism, there's this idea of rebirth, that like we've experienced like literally countless lifetimes of existence in multiple forms. And I personally don't think that's limited to just like, you know, when you were born, because like, you know, every day you're born and like you're, you know, you're a new person being born. um but that might not be relevant right now. But um so like this classic traditional way of, you know, viewing rebirth, um it's intrinsically tied, like rebirth and death. So in the traditional, um in the traditional stories, you will hear people use the phrase, instead of nibbana or enlightenment or liberation, you'll hear them call like they have attained the deathless. And it's not that like they live forever, but they've escaped the cycle of death and rebirth and suffering. And so when the Buddha was enlightened, like he, you know, attained this enlightened, liberated state, but he was still a person, like he was still living and eating and stuff. But he was able to like see the world from an enlightened perspective. And then like when he died, they call his death the perinirvana or perinibbana, which is like the final enlightenment. Like the flame has finally gone out. Not that he stopped existing, but he has. Well, that's a can of worms saying he stopped existing, or he existed. But the cycle of of samsara had ended, you know, and the the fuel for dukkha was extinguished finally, like for a final time, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I think that um question, your answer to that question clarified that there is more questions.
You know, for me too. No, I feel like I rambled a lot.
No, I think that was a good explanation.
Those three questions are the only notes that I did not take.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to the next question for the next episode about, we'll just leave it at faith. It's going to be about faith, right? Is that the question we're looking at?
I guess so.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited to get into that more, and then further this discussion. I mean, I think we have a lot of ground to
Oh my
tread,
gosh.
and I think it's gonna be good. I think
It's
it's
gonna
gonna,
be it's gonna be so much fun. And
yeah.
for the viewers and listeners, like So this was like an intro episode. I hope it wasn't too boring. It wasn't for me. So, but
Right.
so as as we go into the show and explore, like we're looking at like we're looking generally for each episode to be on a specific topic, and what those topics are going to be varied and
Very varied.
very varied, and it's gonna be really really fun, I think.
I think so too. I'm really looking forward to discovering some of these topics, and especially like doing like comparisons, and like anytime I get to explain things, I always love it. Like I tend to ramble just like you sometimes. So I think being able to do that and then compare notes, it's going to be a lot of fun. And maybe maybe some of these topics will even be kind of hard for not as far as like trying to get the point across, but maybe even like there might be some hard topics to discuss too. I can just
Yeah,
imagine that coming up.
I mean, I think you're right on both accounts. Like it'll be
Yeah,
hard to
exactly.
get the point across, but also hard
Yeah.
topics in
Yeah.
general.
Because I don't think I mentioned this, but like I've been doing what I've been doing for, more than 10 years now in my study. And I think you mentioned you became a member of um that temple in like 2014, 2015. So like we have a lot of like time under our belts for like being able to understand what we understand. So trying to convey that is going to be it's going to be a really good challenge.
Yeah, because like especially on topics and um on topics and concepts that we may not have yet had to explain out loud.
Exactly. Yes.
It's I mean just even just now like in this episode it's like wow, like I need some practice, like explaining these concepts to someone who like isn't already doesn't already understand them like on an intellectual level at least.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. And so the next one will be probably the topic on faith, whatever that means.
Oh man.
And I think, from my perspective, I don't think it's what you think it is.
I concur.
Yeah, I can. I don't even know where you're gonna go with that. So this it's gonna be good.
The
Oh,
suspense.
I know it's gonna be suspenseful. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So I thank you for anyone that's watching or listening.
If you
Um,
have questions or comments, comment, comment like
mhm.
on the video or like email. I don't know.
Maybe we'll have an email set up.
Maybe. Yeah. That's a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, we'll get.
If we have an email, it will be on the screen now.
Yeah, we'll get that set up and everything. So I think it'll be a good place for people to contact us for questions or comments, or maybe we can take some narrative from them and go with it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, well, this has been the Baptist
And the Buddhist
with Mark.
and Bryan,
So
episode 1.
episode 1. So we will see you for episode 2. Thank
Yeah.
you all for listening and watching.
Yes. Thank you.